Northern British Columbia is a land of breathtaking beauty, towering mountains, endless forests, and rivers that cut through the wild. But this landscape, so powerful and awe-inspiring, hides a painful secret. Highway 16, stretching over 724 kilometers, connects remote communities through this vast wilderness. For many, it's a lifeline, often the only way to reach hospitals, schools, or family. Yet the road is isolated, with long stretches where there's nothing but trees and sky. Beneath the beauty, there's a story of immense sorrow. For Indigenous communities, this highway is more than a road. It's become a symbol of fear and grief. The silence of the woods is unsettling, holding the unanswered questions of those who have vanished. For decades, Highway 16 has been the setting for a series of unsolved disappearances and murders. The victims are almost all women and girls, most of them Indigenous. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, loved and cherished. One day they were simply gone. Some were found later, their lives cut short. Many have never been found at all. Their families are left with a wound that cannot heal. The beautiful landscape has become a constant, painful reminder of who they have lost. The road itself seems to carry the weight of this tragedy, a dark ribbon through a haunted land. The story of the Highway of Tears is not just about a place, but about the lives stolen and the families left behind. It's a story that demands to be told and remembered. This is the Highway of Tears, and it is time to listen. The name Highway of Tears didn't come from officials. It came from the people who lost loved ones here. In the 1990s, as more women and girls went missing, families saw a terrifying pattern. The disappearances were happening along the same stretch of road, and the victims were mostly young Indigenous women. The name emerged from conversations filled with grief and frustration, a way to express the shared sorrow flowing through their communities. It's a protest, a refusal to let these women and girls be forgotten. The name forces us to see the human cost of violence and indifference. It also points to a harsh reality. For many, there are few safe ways to travel in northern BC. Public transit is scarce, and many can't afford cars, leaving hitchhiking as the only option. The Highway of Tears is a stark reminder of systemic failure, a system that leaves its most vulnerable citizens at risk. When we say Highway of Tears, we're talking about more than a road. We're talking about a national tragedy. The name is a memorial, a warning, and a call to action. It was born from the hearts of grieving families and has become a rallying cry for justice. It ensures these women are remembered with the sorrow and respect they deserve. The name itself is an act of resilience. It turns pain into a demand for change, and it will not let us look away. The tragedy began in 1969 when Gloria Moody, a 26-year-old Indigenous woman, disappeared and was found murdered. At first, it seemed like an isolated crime. But over the next years, more women vanished. Micheline Pear in 1973, Gail Ways in 1974. Each case brought fresh grief, but few answers. The police investigated, but the cases quickly went cold. The vast wilderness seemed to swallow people whole. By the late 1970s and 80s, a chilling pattern emerged. Young, mostly Indigenous women, last seen hitchhiking or walking along Highway 16. Families whispered about a predator on the highway, warning their children, but many had no choice but to travel. The pattern was undeniable to those living it, but authorities treated each case as isolated. There was little sense of a coordinated effort to find a serial killer or address the dangers. Families felt alone in their grief and fear. They saw the connections, but it felt like no one else was listening. The shadows on the highway grew longer with each passing year. The list of the missing and murdered continued to grow. The silence from those in power was deafening. The tragedy deepened, and the community's fear became a way of life. The Highway of Tears was taking shape. Fear became a constant for those living along Highway 16. Parents held their children closer, warning them about the dangers of the road. For Indigenous women and girls, the threat was personal. They saw themselves in the faces on missing posters. Simple acts like walking to a friend's house became calculated risks. Women traveled in groups, memorized license plates, and shared travel plans. But precautions could only do so much. The fear was made worse by a deep distrust of the police. Families who reported missing loved ones were often met with indifference or suspicion. Police sometimes blamed the victims, suggesting they'd run away. or brought trouble on themselves. This victim blaming was painful and made families hesitant to seek help. Communities organized their own searches, put up posters and raised reward money. They did the work they felt the police should be doing. This built solidarity but also deepened the sense of abandonment. The terror on the highway was theirs to face alone. The timeline of the Highway of Tears is a long, heartbreaking record of loss. It began in 1969 with Gloria Moody, and through the 70s and 80s more names were added, each a fresh tragedy. The official response was slow and uncoordinated. Families' pleas echoed unanswered. In the 90s, the crisis accelerated. Cecilia Nichol, Ramona Wilson, Roxanne Thiara, Alicia Germain all vanished within years. By then, the Highway of Tears was a national headline. In 1998, a vigil in Smithers marked a turning point. Private grief became public advocacy. The 2000s brought more attention, but the violence continued. Nicole Hoare's 2002 disappearance drew national media, highlighting disparities in response between Indigenous and non-Indigenous victims. Frustration led to the 2006 Highway of Tears Symposium, which produced 33 recommendations for action. Some progress followed, but heartbreak persisted. Madison Scott's 2011 disappearance reignited fear. In 2012, the RCMP finally acknowledged the connections between cases, but for many it was too late. The timeline is a testament to decades of failure and pain. Each date is a stolen life, a shattered family. The fight for answers continues. The story is not over. In 2005, the RCMP launched Project E-Pana, a task force to investigate the Highway of Tears cases. It began with hope. Finally, resources and attention for the missing women. Officers re-examined evidence and used new forensic tools, expanding the list of official victims from 9 to 18. They linked one American convict, Bobby Jack Fowler, to at least one murder, but he died in prison before facing justice. Despite some breakthroughs, Project E-Pana was criticized for its narrow scope. Indigenous groups listed over 40 victims, but many families felt excluded when their loved ones weren't recognized. The task force solved few cases, and most remain unsolved. Over time, resources dwindled and momentum faded. For many, Project E-Pana became another broken promise. It did not bring home the missing or address the root causes of violence. It was a police investigation, not a plan for safety. The need for real change remained. Through decades of heartbreak, families of the missing and murdered became relentless advocates. They turned grief into action, organizing walks, vigils, and speaking out in the media. Mothers like Matilda Wilson became powerful voices, sharing their pain to demand justice. Their advocacy led to the 2006 symposium and the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Their testimony shaped the inquiry's report and calls for change. Despite immense pain, they continue to fight for answers, justice, and a safer future. They've built networks of support, connecting with others across Canada. The Highway of Tears is now a symbol of resistance and love. Their voices are the conscience of the nation. The Highway of Tears tragedy is rooted in Canada's history of colonialism and systemic racism. The legacy of residential schools and cycles of trauma have left many Indigenous communities vulnerable. Lack of basic services, especially safe transportation, forces people to hitchhike. Communities have long called for a shuttle bus, a simple solution ignored for years. Deep distrust of police, built over generations, means crimes go unreported and unsolved. All these factors, poverty, trauma, lack of services, and distrust, create a perfect storm. Predators know Indigenous women are at risk and often ignored. The Highway of Tears is a symptom of a much larger disease. To address it, we must confront these painful truths. Real change means tackling the roots, not just the road. Despite the darkness, there is hope. The National Inquiry's 2019 report called the violence a Canadian genocide and issued 231 calls for justice. Some progress is happening. Bus services, expanded cell coverage, and community safety initiatives. These changes are driven by communities refusing to wait for government action. The greatest hope comes from Indigenous communities themselves. Cultural revitalization, reclaiming language, ceremony, and tradition, is a form of healing. Young women are growing up proud, determined to create a safer future. The journey toward justice is far from over, but the silence has been broken. The truth of the Highway of Tears is now part of our national conversation. We all have a responsibility to listen, support, and demand action. The road ahead is long, but together, we can transform the Highway of Tears into a path of healing and peace. Remember their names and never look away.